Hi, everyone. Welcome to Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. This is where we go behind the scenes so we can talk about what really goes on, whether it's public speaking, in this case, launching a book, and other things that we're working on in our businesses. I'm Carol Cox, founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand. This is our live show that we're doing every other Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So same time, same place. You can catch us on LinkedIn Live as well as on YouTube Live. And I am so honored today to have as my guest Elayne Fluker, who is an entrepreneur. She's a podcaster and she's an author. Her book, Get Over I Got It, was just published in May by HarperCollins Leadership, a traditional publisher and a very prestigious publisher. There's her book. I have my copy as well. So we're going to talk today about how the book came about in the sense of how Elayne's thought leadership, the content that she consistently put out, led to this book deal. And then we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the book launch. So how she generated interest in the book, because we know pre-order sales are really important. So how Elayne generated interest, how she got those pre-order sales, how the book launch went, and what she would do differently next time. And this will apply whether you're launching a book, launching a podcast, launching a video series, whatever it happens to be. Because when we think about launching, it's like getting people excited about what's coming up, and then making sure that we're putting out that content to them consistently. Elayne, welcome to Backstage.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Carol. And for those who can see me, I promise I'm not crying because I'm here. If I am, it's because of joy. All of a sudden, my eyes were like, hey, let's water. So that's what that was all about. So if you see me dabbing, that's why. But I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Elayne was on the Speaking Your Brand podcast last summer in episode 186. And we talked quite a bit in that episode about how she went from a hashtag to her podcast, to her book. So you can definitely go there and get more details. And like Tit said, today I really want to focus on the book launch. And if you have questions for us as we're going live, please feel free to do that in the comments there on LinkedIn, because we can see them live. So go ahead and let us know what questions you have or ideas you have. And then if you're watching the replay, also say hi to us there. Elayne, let's go ahead and dig in. So tell us about the book, about, where this idea of Get Over I Got It came from, and then how you started kind of working through this content, playing with this content on your podcast.
Yeah, well, the podcast, as you know, because Carol was a guest also, is called Support is Sexy. And it's all about sharing the stories of women entrepreneurs, not only how they became successful in their businesses, but also what that journey looked like and the role that support played in along the way. So as you mentioned, Support is Sexy for me started as, well, even before it was a hashtag, it was sort of a mantra for myself, just this new perspective on support and being able to embrace it as something as sexy, like a sexy dress or a sexy vacation or those kind of things. So, and that came out of my experience in a program called Momentum, a personal development workshop, where I first realized that I had this sort of, oh, no, I don't need support reaction to support. I had what I now call I got it syndrome, right? So every time someone would offer me support as an ambitious woman or someone who had something to prove or all the other reasons that we might say, I got it. No, I got it. It's okay. I got it. So that's when I realized I had this I got it syndrome. So I started to say after that workshop, support is sexy, support is sexy. And then when I said it to other women who I knew in my life, whether they were entrepreneurs or moms or whatever they were going through, when I heard them talking about a problem where I felt like a little bit of support might be helpful here, I would say, well, don't forget, girl, support is sexy. And they'd be like, oh, I like that. And then, once it starts to be a hashtag, you're like, okay, maybe I'm on to something here. So that's how that sort of beginning of that journey started. And then the book came out. Well, I've always been a writer. I've been a writer as long as I can remember. I say even before I knew how to write. I used to scribble on paper because I like the feeling of writing. I just always loved it. I don't know. And then I've always wanted to write a book. I didn't know what it was going to be. I've had novel ideas and written manuscripts and all those things, worked in media, as you know, for 20 something years. But then after having conversations on my podcast, Support is Sexy, with all of these incredible women, I noticed there was always a point in their journey where they realized they were saying, I got it, to something, right? Trying to do whatever it is on their own. And that's really how the book began to evolve. Like, hey, I think this is something that women outside of the 500 something women that I've spoken to might be struggling with for all of these different reasons that I go into in the book. So it's not something that's all in your head. Let's talk about pay inequality. Let's talk about other kind of discrimination. Let's talk about all these other things that are going on historically and presently that might make women hesitate to get that support. That acknowledge, now what are we going to do? And that's where this idea of Get Over I Got It for the book came from.
I love it. And Elayne, so how did the book contract come about? Did you have a really clear idea of what you wanted the book to look like, and then you found an agent and then found a publisher? Or was it kind of like, I had this idea of Support is Sexy, and then you found an agent and a publisher, and then they helped you form the book?
Yes and yes. So I had an idea, right? I had an idea for the book. The Support is Sexy book is what I was just calling it at that time. And because I did work in media, so magazine publishing, digital, TV, et cetera, I did have contacts with different agents who I reached out to, like, hey, I have this idea for a book. At that time, it wasn't even a full proposal. I think I might have had a 2-page sort of synopsis of this is what I'm thinking. And the agents who I reached out to, although they were lovely and very nice, but they kindly rejected the book, either because they didn't do what they considered self-help books, or they were just focused on this for a while, or it didn't feel right for them. So Carol, I had to walk my talk. I went into the Support is Sexy Mastermind Facebook group. This is a group of about 400 or so women that I host on Facebook, as I mentioned. And I said, hey, does anybody know an agent? I have a proposal I want to send out to someone. And Corinne Corbett, who is a former colleague from Essence, she happens to be in that group. And she said, oh, Nick Childs just became an agent. Now, I've known Nick for, I don't know how many years. He's a writer, Pulitzer Prize winning author, really great guy, and has been a writer for many years. So I only knew him as a writer. She said, he just happened to post on Facebook that he just became an agent and he's looking for people to submit proposals. Now, I'm connected to Nick on Facebook and I knew him, but that's one of those things where I tell people you never know where the support is going to show up. So if I had never asked, she wouldn't have mentioned it. She wouldn't have had a reason to, right? Most likely, I should say more than likely, we don't know. So when she did that, I said, oh, okay, I'll email him. I sent Nick the proposal or the synopsis. He loved it. And then we started working on the proposal. And that's the proposal process, though, I will share if you want to go into this more. For me, it took over, let me see, that was 2016, I think. And maybe it took about a year or so to get the proposal right, because I had the first draft of it. And what I ran into, and stop me at any time because I could talk about this forever.
No, please. I think it's really helpful. Yeah. This is behind the scenes. We want everything.
Behind the scenes, right. So I'm answering your question, but it's just a long answer. Yeah. So I got, we got the proposal together, all the components of it, your introduction, your marketing piece, all of these other things. And, Carol, not for nothing, I'm thinking, well, I've been in media for 20 years and I know all these people, in behind the scenes or at the Today Show and outlets and all that other stuff. So I'm thinking, of course, a publisher is going to love that. Like, oh, okay, she already has a contact. She can just give us her list, or she can just reach out to people, etc. No. All about social media. They're really? Like, that's great that Ava DuVernay. How many followers do you have? Like, it was it took me aback. I will be honest about it. I'm not saying all publishers. I'm saying the ones that rejected Nick and I, or me. I put him in it with me, but that rejected us, because I was like, well, I want to see the rejections. What are they saying? And all of them were some version, I should say most of them were some version of, oh, we really love the idea, or we really like Elayne, or we see the potential. My podcast was just early starting and growing at that time. We really see the potential, all good stuff. But right now we're really looking for people who already have a following. So I share that to say that is something that even someone who had been in the business for all these years, came up against. What I did, though, is I got support. So I talked to this woman, Jen, I always forget your last name, Jen Clark, I want to say. She's a marketing person who works with a lot of different authors. I knew her because she had pitched a bunch of people to me whose books had come out over the years for my podcast, like I'll think of the person when it is women that who have these phenomenal best-selling books. So I said, okay, maybe I'll ask her about the marketing piece, because people love the idea. So it wasn't like I had to change that. They liked me for what they knew of me. I didn't have to change that, right? But it was the marketing piece. And I talked to Jen. I said, look, this is what I'm coming up against. And she said, she just poured out all these ideas of things I could do. Note to everyone, though, I paid her. And I say that just to say, when you want to you're really working on something. And it wasn't a fortune, but I told her, what do you charge? I want an hour, and I don't want you to hold back because of any kind of feelings. Mm-hmm. Tell me what your rate is. I'm going to pay you for that hour and give me all the things. And she gave me all the ideas that have worked for her other, Barbara, what's Barbara's name? Barbara, the money. Dang it.
From the Shark Tank, that one?
Not Barbara Corcoran. No. It's another Barbara. Oh my goodness, it'll come to me. But anyway, She's worked with fantastic women, and she gave me all of the things that have worked well, from email campaigns, etc. And in a nutshell, for your audience, what you have to think of, what do you have? So for me, the shift in my focus, instead of just, I have these contacts, etc. Yeah, that's true. But That's a lot different than I will reach out to this person, this person, this person. These people have this many followers on their social media. So it's not even just about your social media. I talked about my podcast and really talked about that audience, which is something I probably mentioned more as an aside before of, oh, and she's hosted this podcast that has, et cetera. It's like it reaches this many people and it's growing at this rate and it's doing this. So really for anyone, I don't want you to get discouraged and say, well, I don't have, either the contacts or the social media. I probably am a person, unless by some act of God or Oprah happens to retweet me or something, I'm never going to have 1 million followers. And that's fine. If it happens, it happens, or never going to try, I would say, work to have 1 million followers. I don't even know how to do that. I think it's wonderful. And for most people, it just happens, even if you work with an agency, et cetera. So I wasn't going to wait until that happened. Right. Because that wasn't my aspiration. So I was thinking, what can I do? And really, I would advise really focus on what you can do or what you do have, I should say. And don't think, again, even if you don't have a big social following or you don't have the contacts, or what would you be willing to do? So say if you say, I'm willing to do, well, this was, pre-pandemic. And as we go into life again, however many city book tour in order to promote the book, I'm willing to, talk at schools for free in order to promote the book. I'm willing to do all these other things. So that was very helpful to me in talking to Jen. And then we went back out with the book proposal. And that's how we ended up getting signed with HarperCollins leadership.
Oh, so you were able on the marketing side to leverage the people you knew who had larger followings because they would be willing to help promote the book for you.
Right. So instead of just saying, oh, I know Carol Cox who hosts the Speaking Your Brand podcast that has such and such followers and she does events for this. And then then they can get a bigger vision of what kind of contacts or interactions you already are doing, as opposed to just, they're just basically just looking at your numbers if that's all you give them. Right. So I would encourage anyone promoting a book, especially self-published, but even if it's published, the publishers for me are basically like, we'll distribute it for you, but what are you going to do about everything else?
Yes.
Yes.
So no, they expect you to market it nowadays. They don't do the marketing really.
No, they don't do the marketing. I will say the team at HarperCollins leadership for me has been supportive. And during the launch, we had meetings every week with my team and theirs and those kind of things. But still, it's pretty much, this is what we're doing. Can you help? That was my experience.
So Diane over on LinkedIn is asking, would you recommend then working on building your following while you're working on the book idea and book proposal at the same time?
Yes, Diane, thank you for that question. I always say decorate your house before someone shows up at your door. Right. You don't want to be scrambling, Googling, like, I need a couch while I'm at your door. Like, hey, Diane, what in the world? She won't open the door, looking through the window and stuff. Decorate your house now. Now, don't do it in a way that you feel you have to build this big following before you do the other things. Do it now, even before you think about the book. When your podcast, if you're just launching your podcast and those kind of things, get out there and do that now, because it's important to have something to show. Because then even if you're not at 1 million followers, you can say my show or my podcast or my following has grown from this to this percentage. Percentage is always smarter than the actual numbers, right? Percentage growth is better than, 100 to 200 is 100% or whatever percentage it is, 200%, however that works. But do percentage wise as opposed to just the numbers, whereas people are just looking for 1 million. So I would say definitely start, decide also what platform most of your audience is on or going to be on, either that or I should say, what platform you enjoy the most. So for me, I absolutely love LinkedIn. I make great connections on LinkedIn. I have a great community on LinkedIn of, 1,000 followers. I don't know where everyone has come from, but I'm happy to have them here. But listen to this, Diane and Carol and everyone else. So I have 19,000 something followers on LinkedIn, but that's today. When I started, when I was promoting this book, I had maybe 1,000 something. So that's an example of just keep going, right? Keep building, keep talking about it, telling folks what you're up to, deciding on what platform I say you're going to really lean into. And I'm on the other platforms as well, but I would say LinkedIn is really a focus for me just because I love the platform overall and what they allow us to do. And then Instagram is the one that's more fun for me. And the others I just kind of keep, going. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, Elayne. So, okay. So I have lots of questions for you. So first, let me ask you, let me just say this for everyone listening. So we're talking specifically about books and book launches, but this really applies if you're launching a podcast or any type of kind of like content that you're doing, because I know I have been the recipient of friends of mine who have launched new podcasts and they've asked me to be on their podcast launch team in the sense of when their podcast comes out to share it in social media. I share it in our email newsletter. I leave a review for them on podcasts. So definitely leverage your network and prepare them ahead of time to let them know that this is coming and give them the assets that they can work with to do that. And I'm sure, Elayne, that you did that. Did you do something similar with your book launch? Did you have like a book launch team?
Absolutely. We had a book launch team send an email out to the newsletter list and just and that could be just as quick aside, your team, your launch people, et cetera, for your podcast could be family and friends who aren't even on social media. You could say, text this many people the link to my podcast, make it, as I say, do Support is Sexy overall, make it easy for people to support you, right? Mm-hmm. I have cousins who are like, I'm not on, what is LinkedIn? I'm not even, what are you talking about? I send them a link, like send this to 5 people in your contact list. That they can do. And people usually want to support you. But yes, to answer your question, yes, get on those platforms now, build that audience, get it out there, tell people what you are up to as you continue to grow and that kind of thing. Great. And then definitely have definitely have a strategy for your launch of how you're going to ask people to sign up to support you. So we definitely did that. And I can talk about that if you like.
Yes. And use Elayne's mantra, support is sexy, and get over I got it, because it's true. Like a lot of us feel like, oh, I'm going to bother someone if I ask them to help me. But you would be surprised. Like I am so appreciative when friends of mine ask me to help them, because I'm like 100% yes. And thank you for asking. Like I'm honored to help you with this.
And I'm honored when friends ask, and I'm even honored and excited when friends ask and they're like, here are the quotes you can use from the book. Here are links that where to send people to. Again, make it easy for people to support you, right? Here's what you can tweet on Twitter. Here's what you can say on Instagram. Here are images to use. So we created just on a Google Drive, a bunch of images of me, of the book cover, a flat cover, a sideways cover, or whatever, that's 3D cover. What else is in there? Just quote cards, a bunch of things that are just in a regular Google Doc that anyone could have access to, and included that so people could go in different sizes for the different platforms, so people could go in and choose the ways that they wanted to support, in addition to content about the book and that kind of thing. So that's something anyone, if you have access to, Dropbox, Google Docs, anything like that, can do to again make it easy for people to support you.
Great point. And I want to ask you, Elayne, what do you think was instrumental in getting you on LinkedIn from the 1,000 followers to the 19,000 followers? What did you do visibility wise?
Consistency, I think, was part of the key. Also, being in touch with the folks at LinkedIn. I happen to be asked by Tyrona Heath, who's wonderful, who's at LinkedIn, the global lead for the B2B Institute. I interviewed her on my podcast. That's how that started. So it wasn't the whole idea of decorating before the house gets here, but making connections and contacts and building real relationships and rapport with people before you quote unquote need them. So I interviewed Ty because I wanted to find out more about LinkedIn. I was like, I need a LinkedIn expert. Someone said, oh, I know this woman, Ty, that's how that happened. I asked. Someone represented her, and that's how that. So we stayed in touch after that and talked a few times. And then actually February 28th, 2020, before the world shut down, Ty invited me to be a speaker at Transform Her, which is a conference for women in technology. And I did that in New York. And that's actually the first place where I really talked about the I got it syndrome and I've done public speaking, but this was the first time really talking about that. So having that relationship with her, and then her saying, oh, I'm going to put you in touch with this person for other things that are coming up on LinkedIn. So for example, LinkedIn Live, which at first hadn't rolled out to everyone, starting to do that regularly. I think most people have access to it now. That was a way of building, because people could actually see me talking and that kind of thing, interviewing people that I do for the podcast, but seeing the person in action. Also having a newsletter on LinkedIn really helps, because the great thing about it is their newsletter, if you subscribe to my newsletter on LinkedIn, you'll automatically get an email whenever it publishes. Not one that I have to send to you. So that started, of course, with 0. And I remember saying to the woman who told me about it when they were rolling it out, I think they're still rolling that out. I said, oh my gosh, I'm almost at 1,000 followers. I want to get to 1,000 by, whatever period it was. She's like, you're going to be fine. So now I didn't know. I had no idea just how much it could grow once you're active and consistent. And now that's over 10,000 something subscribers through nothing I've done other than being consistent and having, good content and something that people find valuable. So that's why I think whatever the platform, we're talking about LinkedIn, which we both love, but whatever platform you're on, find out what's the best practices. You don't have to necessarily know someone there, but there's so many articles. I mean, HubSpot has great articles and all these different platforms that tell you best times of day to post, what's working for other people, what kind of things like that. And then you start from 0. I have a lovely lady. I think I saw her comment pop up in here. I used to work with, I won't say her name, but she can shout herself out if she likes. We worked together 2 years ago, 2 or 3 now. It was definitely before the pandemic, 2019, I think, when I was writing the book. And she was just starting on Instagram on her platform. And I was nudging her, we say giving each other elbows to do video on the platform. And, at the time you feel like, well, nobody's really there. I have, 400 something followers. You got to speak to the people who are there. Those people are even more important because they're your early supporters, right? Just do it. Now she has 15,000 or 16,000 followers and a lot of great things coming up this year. Like I said, I don't want to blow up. You know who you are. But it just, for me, it made me so happy because I'm like, right, they showed up at your door and now they can see, oh, she's done videos. Oh, this is, they find out more about you as opposed to you saying, I got to wait for 16,000 people to show up before I post something. So hopefully that's encouraging, right? We're waiting for the audience to show up for the content that we haven't created.
Yes, I started the Speaking Your Brand podcast 4.5+ years ago now, and had 20 downloads per episode, and then 50 downloads per episode, right? Then 100 down, and it just keeps growing over time. But I 100% agree with you, Elayne, about making a commitment to yourself for that consistency. If you're going to do weekly, like keep to the weekly schedule that you've set for yourself, because your audience will show up for you and it will grow when you're
that worked for me too. Yes, absolutely. With the podcast, that's how I grew the podcast, just speaking about different things, like you said, with launching. So Support is Sexy, when I first started in 2016, July 4th, 2016, I was doing it 5 days a week, like a crazy person. I was releasing episodes 5 days a week because I will say I thought I was Oprah, even though I forgot Oprah has a whole team. This was just me in my little apartment in Brooklyn in Bed-Stuy up there at 5 a.m. Like this is Elayne. It was crazy, but I did it. I stuck to it for 2 years until I started traveling. Then it was like impossible. But what that did for me, one, I remember Zara Green, a friend who I interviewed. I think she may be episode 27 of the podcast or 17. And she said to me, you have no idea how many women you're going to meet during this. And at the time I was like, really? You think so? But I didn't realize you're having an hour-long or so conversation with all of these women that you admire. Basically, you're doing their favorite thing, asking them all about them, right? It's pretty much putting them on the stage, sharing about their business, really being open and loving and all those things. So the fact that I was doing 5 episodes made me a standout at that time. And not that I was the only one doing that, but for me, I didn't know any women who were just focused on women entrepreneurs 5 days a week. I certainly at that time didn't know any Black women who were just focused on women entrepreneurs podcast 5 days a week. So to go back to our original point, even though I didn't have huge numbers, I had a point of distinction. And sometimes that is, if not more, as important as the numbers, right? Well, I'm doing this different thing. And I have a story about that too, of how that helped me get sponsors, if you want me to share that.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. I want you to share that. And for those of you who are listening live, especially, if you have questions, let us know in the chat. And also, I would love to know if you have something that you're going to be launching, whether it's a book, a podcast, a live show, anything like that. Let us know in the comments here. All right, Elayne. So tell us then about the sponsors, because when you first told me last year that you were doing 5 days a week interviews for the first 2 years, and because I was wondering how you had like 700 and some episodes by the time I was on your podcast, and that is how. So how did that lead to the sponsors?
So we were at a podcast movement conference. This was 2018, right? And in the room at Podcast Movement, this was before I started all the traveling that I was doing in different countries. And it was one of the sessions on sponsorship. Everyone's in the audience, and they had these amazing people up there who were from different agencies, and people were standing and asking questions like, okay, well, my podcast, because most people at the conference in the audience don't have 50,000 downloads per episode. Those are the people who are usually on stage, right? So most people in the audience are like, well, if I don't have 50,000 downloads an episode, someone asked a version of this, can I get sponsors? And one of the women up there was basically like, no, you have to wait until you grow to a certain size. And another woman on the stage said, who from Ad Large, the CEO, co-CEO, she's like, well, I don't know if that's true. We're starting to see more companies now looking for niche audience, to podcasters who focus on niche audiences, whether women entrepreneurs, people who are into crime stories. That's one of the biggest categories, oddly enough. So she just mentioned that, and I was like, oh, that's really inspiring. So at the end, I wanted to stand up and ask her a question. I don't even remember what my question was, but I do remember that I wanted to say, my name is Elayne Fluker, and I'm host of the Support is Sexy podcast, where I interview women entrepreneurs 5 days a week, and then lead into, because everyone else would stand up, not even say their name, much less what they did. That people say, hey, what's your question to you? And you stand up like, I want to know if blah, blah, which is, that's a question. But I'm thinking, I'm in a room of 300 something people. I have these folks on the stage. Let me tell my point of distinction, right? So I said that, I sat down, and then I asked a question. I swear, I don't remember the question. I was going up to her to meet her, just to thank her for giving us, I'm sure, other people encouragement. It certainly encouraged me to be like, okay, well, I can still, keep this going. And there are people who might be looking for me. Her co-CEO came up to me for the side while I was in line to meet her and said, did you say that you interview women entrepreneurs 5 days a week? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I started telling him about it. I told him the whole Oprah joke and that whole thing. He's like, that's amazing. I'm co-founder of AdLarge, and we have this part of the business called Cabana, which focuses on women especially. And I would love to get you in touch with our head of development, and that is how that started. So while I was traveling to all these different countries, I was talking to the head of development of how to get how to get Supported Sexy as part of their cadre of podcasts, and I've been with them ever since.
That's amazing, Elayne. Yes.
That's how that happened.
I love that. Goal number one, that is one of the benefits of in-person conferences and events. And I'm so glad that we're able to get back to that, because you do have those moments where you get to meet people you otherwise would not have access to. And I love that the point about when you stand up to ask a question, definitely introduce yourself and your point of distinction, something memorable that people,
short and memorable,
that people can kind of connect. Oh, that person said that keyword that I'm interested in. Let me go find her afterwards. I love that.
Exactly. I'm going to find the name of the CEO because I hate not knowing people's name. Kathy Sukas is the co-CEO of AdLarge and Cabana. Frank DeSantis is the gentleman who's the senior VP of business development. And what's the other gentleman's name? We can keep going. Gary Schoenfeld is the one who came up to me, just to be respectful. I like name propping.
Yes.
Name propping. And that's public information. I'm not giving away anything. So I just wanted to get that from their websites.
Well, thank you, Elayne. I appreciate it. So let's talk about the book launch itself. So we talked a little bit about contacting friends and family and colleagues and giving the assets ahead of time and, making it easy for them to share. What else did you do before the publication date of your book to get pre-orders?
I hired a publicist and I hired a social media company. So social media strategy company. Publicist is Dawn Michelle Hardy, who's amazing book publicist. She's been in the business for many years. And then the Ezer agency run by a woman named Altamise Nicole was the social media company. I've been wanting to hire them for a long time, Carol, but I couldn't figure out the budget for myself, just to be honest, as an entrepreneur. I'm like, how can I do this? When am I to do this? So in the fall of 2020, I happen to be one of 100 Black women entrepreneurs who received an award from American Express for 100 innovative Black women entrepreneurs or Black women founders from my Sis Academy, which is an online learning platform. With that came $25,000 as a grant. As soon as I found out about it, once I applied, they told us we're getting it in November. I reached out to those women right away and was like, so send me the invoices. This is where let's get started promoting this book and telling people about this book. What should the strategy be? So even if you don't hire people, just to tell you, that's what I did. In addition to, we did rollouts of emails and telling people it's coming up. And again, giving ways that people can support, making it super easy, putting all the info in the email. In addition to that, having an idea of what your story is going to be as you lead up to the book. So for example, some of the things that we did through the women that I work with, quotes from the book. Even though the book's not out, you have great quotes and then you can write more about it. Some other things, obviously images, and some of the images for me, like I did I don't think I have it ready, how it started, how it's going. So I have a picture of me, remember everyone was doing, so kind of taking advantage of the trends that are going on. There was a picture of me, like a little buck-toothed girl, like at school in kindergarten. I think it was a bunch of books or something around it. And then next to it was the reveal of the book cover. Oh. So, that's an example that got people talking, and that got shared a lot on LinkedIn supported a lot on LinkedIn and Instagram. So deciding not only just, I'm going to tell people that I have a book coming out. Well, what's the story? Why did you write it? What are some things that you're going to tell about it? I think that's important. Again, whether you have a publicist or a social media agency or not, everyone can do that. Decide what's going to be this story. What's the intent? I'm very big on intention. What's the intention of this book getting out into the world? What do you want people to know most about it? And then reaching out to those contacts. I mean, for me, a big supporter was being on other people's podcasts. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan. I mean, we're probably biased. I'm a big fan of podcasts because I feel like it's the best way to have someone say, to even if it's hundreds, thousands, millions, but even if it's hundreds of people, Carol says, hey, this is my friend Elayne and I like her book or her work or whatever she's done. And listen to her. I endorse this person. Mm-hmm. And not to say that when you go on Today's Show, Good Morning America, that's not the same thing, but it's different. And there's been studies now about how different it is, right? That podcasts are really more effective from not only a sponsor standpoint, but in helping you get sales. When you go on a Today's Show, it's a big boom. Not to say we don't want that. That's great. But it's not as effective from what study shows as a big bump if you're not already famous. If I appeared on a Today Show, it might be a few people, or people will definitely know more about me. It's bigger reach, but more people will probably sign up, follow me, want to know more about me from talking to you. And I think I did 40 or something other podcasts. Wow. Yes. And also another thing anyone can do, intimate conversations. I actually think that's where I thrive. So conversations like this, even though it's going to be, but I love getting the questions from people in addition to questions from you. I did a lot of private groups kind of thing, of talking to people, who have mastermind groups. And so it might be 50 or so women, but if 50 or even 40 of them buy the book, that's great. Another, I know I'm all over the place. You got to stop me on this.
No,
I've learned
going.
so much I want to share.
Yeah, keep
Another
going.
thing to think about too. So I'm a person that at this stage, my speaker fee for maybe a virtual event might be $5,000 or $2,500, depending on what it is. So say there's a group or an organization that you want to work with for your book, while your book is out, I should say, or coming out, and they don't necessarily have the budget for that. What I started doing, and I think Dawn is the one who recommended this to me, I said, okay, well, if you can buy 25 books, at least 25 books for your members, then buy that, send them a link for the discount, which is through Porchlight. So they do get a discount for buying bulk, and then they can give it to their members, or they could get me to sign it, or send what they call a book plate, which is just your signature that they can put in there, whatever that looks like. But then they can offer it to their group, which helps their group. And then I can also get quote unquote paid, but at least it's through them buying the book if they don't have money just for a big fee. So that's another idea as well for people who are speakers. You can get people to buy your book. That helps with pre-sales and all of those things that we talked about.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Elayne. And then what did you do the actual date of publication? So did you have like specific things you were doing on that date?
Yeah, so I didn't know what to do with myself as a person that day. I just was sitting around like, the book is out and the sun's still shining. What else what's supposed to happen today, right? So my coach came over. She lives nearby. We went for coffee and celebrated. So it was really nice. But then that evening, I actually had an engagement with Mahogany Books out of Washington, D.C. And we did a talk. I talked to the owner and she did it with her group. And it was a public talk. I think the replay is still available there. So it's great to have something where you're doing an event the day your book comes out. And especially, during this time, yes, it was this year, but I didn't have a book. Usually you have a book event and that kind of thing. But this is actually good because then people from everywhere could show up and ask questions, and the same thing, as opposed to if I just had a book party. So now I'm planning smaller events, throughout the rest of the year. Next month, actually, in Martha's Vineyard, which is a place my girlfriends and I from college go every summer. We're meeting up with a woman who owns a store there, and I'm going to do a book signing there and, a small event there. So I'll probably do smaller things along the way, but a lot of my things have been online with bookstores, with local bookstores especially, which is helpful for you and for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to make sure to mention, we can talk about it later, but I do want to talk about what I saw Rachel Rogers do with her book that I wish I had done. So I know you mentioned that part of what we talk about. So if we get, she's on HarperCollins leadership too. She,
yes. Yeah. Well, she has a big team too behind her. Right. And so she was all over the place. She must've been exhausted at all the book talks that she was doing.
Well, we could talk about that too, if we have time, just after the launch, how you feel. And I was really going through some changes, like, okay, it feels weird. Now what do we do? And my friend, Kelly Notaras, who has Kelly.
Yeah, she was on the podcast last year. Yes. Thanks to you.
She was on the podcast and she described it best, the after effect. She said, oh, it's totally postpartum. Yes, it is that feeling after the launch. And people talk about
you're going like this and then like this, right?
Oh my gosh. I swear, Carol, I was like, something's wrong. I'm depressed. I don't know what to do. It's not doing, then you start talking about you start getting into the weeds of what's going wrong as opposed to all of this celebration you did. And her saying it's totally postpartum really let me know, okay, I'm coming down from the high, which is normal. Right. And I said, and I started thinking of it as a baby. I don't have children, but it's like, nobody's rubbing my belly anymore. There's no the baby shower's over right now. You're just home with the baby. You're just home with the baby. You're doing the poop. You're doing all the things to nurture this baby and Dawn actually told me too, the book is actually the beginning of the next chapter. It feels for a lot of us like it's the big culmination of everything, whether it's your work and all of that, but this is really the beginning of a next chapter. So that is something that I wanted to tell everyone, whatever kind of thing you're doing. If you feel yourself sort of coming down, it's normal.
Yes, I love normalizing things like this. Elayne, okay, so let's talk about, you mentioned Rachel Rogers, and what would you do differently when your second book comes out? Let's imagine that happens. What would you want to do in addition to what you did this time?
Yes, what I love that she did is she had a program that she was promoting during the same time she was promoting her book. I think it was her, I don't want to talk out of turn or get it wrong. I think it was her Millionaire club. You talked about it recently on your
Yes,
last
her monthly membership, the club. Yes.
monthly membership. Yes. I think she was promoting that at that time. I know she was promoting something because during the same time as the book. That's smart for a few reasons. One, you can, sell people who do pick up your book and like it directly into your program. But then also I was like, this is brilliant because think about all the free publicity or I should say piggyback publicity that you're getting. You're already everywhere talking about the book. Right. Which is great. So a couple things you give people, you can talk about your program when people say, oh, what else do you have going on? How can people get in touch with you? Send them right to the site where they can sign up for this membership. Right. So you're already getting wherever you're appearing, you're able to talk about that. Also, it helps you have the what's next kind of thing planned. So you're not just in the postpartum space of, okay, now what do I do? Am I going to do a program? For me, it's speaking, as you well know. I want to talk to you about that more, us personally. But, speaking, whatever it's going to be, but at least if you have something in mind for what comes after, you can either you're telling people, if you're not selling people into something, I don't want to make it sound like that's what you have to do. I just thought it was so beautiful and wise and seamless of how they did that. So for me, for example, I would have been talking more about what I was going to do after the book, which for me is bringing this content and these teaching and frameworks into corporations and organizations so they can help women and women's groups in their organizations learn how to get support. So my book is for individuals, but also I want to get it into bigger groups so that I can reach more women and have others who aren't women, who don't identify as women or who don't have this problem, see that this is something that can help your organization. But I didn't really talk about any of that during that time. I just talked about the book. Right. And how people could get it. And, there's other things, how to support and giveaways and those kind of things. But that's something to think about. What do you want to be promoting alongside your book? So you don't want to do anything that's going to outshine it, so to speak. I wouldn't do any huge program. But if it's something like what Rachel did that makes perfect sense after that, I think that's brilliant. So I would definitely do that next time.
And I remember she did a live webinar. And at the end, her call to action was to everyone to buy a hardcover copy of the book, which was still in pre-orders, right? Of course, publishers want those hardcover pre-orders. A lot of people, I had purchased the Kindle pre-order, but hardcovers they really want. And so she said, I don't want you to spend any other money, just spend the $26 for the hardcover. So she got all those pre-orders. And I think they got like a 4-week kind of 4 live calls type of thing in exchange for just spending that. So it was a great value for the audience. And she got her hardcover sales along with it.
That's right. And selling your time or a service or doing some kind of offer, that doesn't put you too far out. You don't want to do 1,000 of them and not be able to fulfill that. But doing an offer or something like that is always good too.
Yeah. So Elayne, tell us about your Sis Academy.
Yeah, Sis Academy. So www.sis.academy, an online learning platform that focuses on empowering and educating Black women entrepreneurs, especially. We have Black women entrepreneurs and our allies on there who are teaching different courses and things, whether it's a course or a conversation that I've had with them about different topics from marketing. So we have Start From Within, which is the personal development piece of it, build your brand, how to make sales, different areas that really are the focus for a lot of us as entrepreneurs. And then from the Black women's perspective, that actually is a shift that I made during 2020 when I was trying to think about, especially after the murder of George Floyd, but what can I do? As opposed to just only looking out and saying, what can other people do? Or what can our allies do? Or what can other organizations do? For me, it was, what am I doing? And I decided to make that shift of, okay, I can focus this because even though content about sales and all these other things might be the same, just having this sort of in mind about Black women's experience as women entrepreneurs, who they're actually the fastest growing, but often the least supported financially and those kind of things. So we speak to that as much as we can and create content that can support them. So you can find that at www.sis.academy.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Elayne. And so you mentioned public speaking. What is next for you? We're right now we are a little over halfway through 2021. Like I said, in-person conferences and events are coming back later this year and into next year. What do you have on the horizon?
I have a meeting with Carol Cox to help me, as all of you should have. That is what is on my horizon. I've been trying to get on Miss Carol's calendar so I can talk about what that looks like. So I have, fortunately, a lot of different talks and things already. I've done that before, but I really want to be smart about how I translate content from the book into a talk. So one of them is this idea of getting over I got it syndrome, which I mentioned. I talked about it at LinkedIn, and then in different places I've talked about it some relation to the book, but really being able to teach it from a framework. So I have the HELP framework, and I have my 5 R's of making an empowered ask and those kind of things. So I just want to polish that up so that I can pitch it in a way that really makes sense to organizations.
Are you thinking both the workshop trainings for the companies and then as well also doing a keynote talk?
Let me tell you, if you all haven't heard Carol Cox's last couple episodes of her podcast, I listened to it twice on a walk yesterday. Your latest episode talking about thought leaders. The latest one
Mhm.
was just thought leaders, but you did a
Mhm.
thought leaders, influencers, experts.
First, yes.
So good. So to answer your question, what I realize is I am the second one. I can't remember what it's called, but it's Brene Brown,
Oh,
Simon
the
Sinek.
research driven.
Researcher. Yes, I
Yes.
am the researcher. Because at first I thought I might be, I knew I wasn't the personality one. Again, go listen to the episode if you haven't heard it. Episode number.
Oh, let's see. It was definitely the last 2 weeks. So that was
Last 2
episodes
weeks.
number 232 and 233.
Go listen to it, folks. So there was the first one, which was personality, which is more of a Rachel Rogers. I remember you said the second, which is the researchers, Simon Sinek and Brene Brown. And then the third one was more of the
mission
driven, right? Mission driven. So I realized I fall into, or I want, whether I'd fall into, this is what I felt, what really resonated with me. The second one, because it's teaching is so much a part of it, not just, this is the program, get into it, be like me. I think you called it. Mine is very much, this was my experience. This is what I found via research, because the book actually, Get Over I Got It, a lot of the content that I use came from once I started doing research around, you start with the idea. I'm like, support is sexy. What does that mean? Is that a thing? What does that look like for people? What is it? And then I started seeing, sad things like the number of increase in suicides for women, for example, between 40 and 65, what the big increase has been over the years. And, I don't know exactly what the cause was, but most women that age, it's stress, it's other kind of things. You're into your real life at that point. You're not a little kid, so there were things like that really came out of the research that helped me build the content for the book in addition to those conversations. So to answer your question, yes. So keynotes as well as trainings, but I really want to get into trainings and workshops and offering these that I've been pitched. Kelly actually connected me with a bunch of retreats and different things like that to talk to women at retreats. So if anybody's interested, ElayneFlukerSpeaks.com. You can see all my speaker information.
Fantastic, Elayne. And your podcast is called Support is Sexy. Definitely everyone go check that out. And if you haven't yet connected with Elayne right here on LinkedIn, make sure to connect with her there. Connect with me as well if you haven't. And thank you so much for being here, Elayne. I so appreciate you. And I'm so inspired by everything you're doing. Oh, I want to say one more thing, which I went to say earlier. So I loved when you did a video of your parents when they got the box of books and of your books, and they opened it and they saw you on this cover of this hardcover book, and you could just see how proud they were and the joy that they had about you.
I will tell you all, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you so much. It's like one of my most popular videos. My parents, I think they're adorable, and other people seem to too, right? They're here in Georgia. I'm near them. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here. And I will tell you, this is the comparison thing, right? Seeing everyone else do their book openings. We all have an idea probably as soon as you hear the book openings thing, like, oh, it has to be this, or, oh my gosh, I got my book. This is the cover, what that meant to me, crying, or whatever that looks like, authentically, of course. So I'm like, okay, I guess I got to get the books and, do some kind of big opening. I'll wait till I have my makeup on, etc. But the books went to my parents' house because that's where I was years ago when I first started, and they at HarperCollins, they were like, it's easier if we just, send it where it is, because then you have to change address. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I happened to go over there as I do every weekend, and the box was there. And I said, oh my gosh, I think these are my books. And I put it on the table. I had them sit down. So that literally happened organically, other than my mom putting lipstick on because she's such a diva. Everything else was literally organically, like me, like, open this box. I didn't tell them, I told them I think it's my book, but they didn't know what it was going to look like. And you see my dad is there, you guys, with the book like this. I was like, first of all, it's upside down. Second, this is a video. And he's like,
it's so cute.
So people loved it, but it was so great, Carol, because it was organic. And I was like, I think that's my book review. I think that's it. What else am I going to do? Nobody wants to see me after that. So that's an example of just sort of going with it, as we talked about. That was me decorating the house before anyone showed up. I don't have, whatever these other things are, but I have two little cute old people who are proud of me, and people really could relate to that.
Yeah, it's definitely the authenticity and the relatability of it. So I loved it. I loved it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Also, go get Elayne's book, Get Over I Got It. And I'll go through in the link. I think the link might be in the LinkedIn post, but we'll make sure it's in there somewhere. So make sure to go get that. And our Backstage with Speaking Your Brand will be back live 2 weeks from today. So that's Monday, August 2nd, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific, same time every other Monday. And so on that episode, Diane Diaz, our lead speaking coach, and I are going to take you behind the scenes of a new course that we're working on. So you're going to get to like delve into our minds as far as like, why did we decide to create this course? How do we decide what kind of content to create? So this will be helpful to you as you're thinking about courses and programs that you want to create as well. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Elayne, thank you again for coming on Backstage with Speaking Your Brand.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. I appreciate you.